Well, on one of my previous episodes, I said this: the two most hopeful words in the English language are next time. Well, today we talk about how those words next time actually might be more a place of hopeless naivety in your life that don't really result in change. Today is a bit of a painful episode on finding traction. Welcome aboard.
Ready?
When it comes to porn, are you stuck, spinning out, or slipping backwards in your life? If so, then welcome to the Finding Traction podcast, a show dedicated to those who are looking to gain recovery momentum away from porn and toward the life and relationships they have always hoped for. Now, here's your host, Vern Tomke.
Well, those two words next time were based on an old podcast I did. You can still find it. It's called Lessons from a Hitman. My favorite novel series is the Orphan X novel series. And Evan Smoke in that series said the two most hopeful words in the English language are next time. And I think that's true. I think that's true if we look at last time and we make the necessary changes so that next time is different than last time. But I think we are painfully naive if we think that next time will somehow be different than last time if we fail to make the necessary changes. There's a great saying that says, if nothing changes, then nothing changes. So if you are doing nothing differently than last time, then I can almost guarantee that next time will look like, guess what? Last time. One of the things I do, people contact me through the website bandofbrothers.care or my email bandofbrothers.care@gmail.com, and they ask me about group coaching or individual coaching. And last week, Matt P., if you didn't get a chance to listen to that podcast, you got to go back and listen to it, because Matt just did an amazing job of talking about how porn interrupted his life in his 20s, how when he moved into a relationship at the end of his 20s, his early 30s, how it resulted in this collision. But then how he wrestled with making the necessary changes in his life. And we've been together. We walked through the 52-week Finding Traction course and putting some of those steps in place so that his next times don't automatically look like his last times. And here's the question I think is worth asking. Why is it that we fail to make the necessary changes? We have, let's say, a binge. And I don't hold people's relapses or binges against them. I rarely find a guy that starts out with me or starts out in a group and they get it automatically perfectly the first time. In fact, sometimes I say that, I threw them to their wives. This will not necessarily be done perfectly. Sometimes you're looking at a 5, 10, 15, 20-year habit, and it takes a while to create new habits, new directions, a new trajectory. But what I'm talking about today is a failure to look at the last time and say, what is it that happened and what do I need to do differently next time? So why do we fail to make those changes? Well, here's a few ideas I have. First one, I think sometimes that we emotionally confuse the idea of regret and remorse with real results. So think about it. Let's say you had a horrible day or a weekend and you find yourself binging on porn, and you show up and you're in your group or with a coach And what often happens, we always start our groups with a check-in. You talk through your feelings, you talk through your recovery actions, you talk about your sobriety, how successful you feel you've been in your sobriety, and then we look at the future, upcoming threats that require tools so that you can be more successful going forward. But here's the point. Guys often say, well, you know what? I had a horrible weekend. I ended up looking at porn, all Saturday night, or I looked at porn, this place or that place. I feel really bad about it. Okay. But feeling bad about something, it's almost like it fools us into thinking because I feel bad about it, that's enough. That's all I need to do is feel bad about something. Well, feeling bad about something doesn't actually result in any real long-lasting changes. If you're from a faith background, you're familiar with that classic word, repentance. It just sounds like a heavy word, right? But all it really means, that fancy repentance word, all it really means is a change in direction. You're going one way, let's say west, and now you're going east. But guys in faith backgrounds always confuse remorse with repentance. So you can have all sorts of negative feelings, whether you're from a faith background or not, but you actually are not walking out any sort of behavioral change or repentance, to use a religious term, if you actually are not making directional changes in how you're living your life. In other words, we're fooling ourselves. So that could be one reason why we just kind of think that we just are hopelessly naive to think that because we feel bad about something, that next time is going to automatically be different than last time. Here's another one that I think is pretty common. We chafe or resist the kind of behavioral changes that we need to make so that next time doesn't look like last time. Let me give you an example. I've been really kind of discouraged the last little while because we've had a lot of snow and ice here, and me going out for a walk is just a really important part of my day. I listen to music, I listen to podcasts, and because it's been so miserable out, when I get off, fall off that habit, then other habits tend to weaken as well. So I said, fine. I went out and bought myself a brand new set of hiking boots just to motivate myself to get out there. They got great tread on them. They're, a little expensive, but great set of hiking boots. So I put them on, I laced them all up, and I went out for my first walk. Well, because the boots are a lot more restrictive than maybe my running shoes were, guess what I now have on the back of my feet? I have sores or blisters. And so I've been putting Band-Aids on them and I've been now out about 3 or 4 times with those new hiking boots and, pulled a big chunk of skin off the other day. I'm sure you want to hear about that. And, but you know what? They've been a little uncomfortable. They've been restricting. And now I could have said, fine, these boots aren't working. I'm just going to take those boots back. Or screw it, I'm just not going to go out and walk because I don't have any comfortable shoes. Well, the bottom line is, as I have learned to walk in those hiking boots over time, I've got more used to it, and my back of my feet are starting to adjust to that new reality. We don't like it when there's restrictions on us. I want to do what I want to do, when I want to do it, how I want to do it. And I don't want to, I can't just lock myself in a room, or I have to live in the real world, or, all those kind of things. I need Facebook. I need to go on Instagram or TikTok, or, I need to connect with people on social media, or I need a browser on my phone, or I need, that kind of thing. Well, here's the point. If every week or every couple weeks or whatever, every time, if your next time is still going to look like last time and you're not making the necessary changes, you're simply fooling yourself. It's one of the things when guys are in groups or individuals and they're having to speak out, how their week's gone. After a while, you can just kind of see the lights start to go on with either the guys around them or themselves, this is not a judgment thing, but it's like people say, you've acted out on your phone 4 or 5 times now in a row over a space of 2 or 3 months. At what point do you just get sick and tired of being sick and tired and do something about it? That's the thing. Sometimes these things have a way of playing themselves out. Other times they just take a kind friend to say, dude, you got to do something with your phone. Or, the last 6 times you've talked about this, you say, well, my wife went to bed and then I was up late, or I got up, in the middle of the night, and, the same old story becomes the same old story, which becomes the same old story. If nothing changes, nothing changes. And so, I would almost be, again, and I work with guys, however, wherever they're at, sometimes gently, sometimes not so gently, saying, hey, do you need to do something different so that next time is different than last time? But I would much rather you be creative and act out in brand new ways. That's a bit of an overstatement. But get creative. If all you're doing is acting out in exactly the same ways, then I'm going, well, are you really serious about recovery? Because these are so obvious, ways that are constantly tripping you up in terms of you wanting to become and moving towards, as we say, the life and relationships you desire for yourself. Now, I really don't want you acting out because what it does for you, but I'm just talking here about if it's always the same thing. In fact, it's one of the ways I guess I use, there's a fancy word, in counseling circles that you try to gauge where people are at. And the fancy word is readiness. How ready is someone for recovery? Now, here's the interesting thing. When guys first come in to groups or individual coaching, everyone almost uses the same sort of phrase. You know what? This has got to change. I'll do anything to change this. Sometimes maybe their keys don't work in their house anymore, or, it feels like their wife's got their foot on their neck or something. I don't know. And they're all going, I'll do whatever, just tell me what to do. I'll do whatever it takes. So those kind of great protestations, they don't, impress me much, I guess you would say. What I really begin to gauge over time is when some of these issues start coming up, if what I get is resistance or pushback to some common sense behavioral changes to either create a lower risk environment in someone's life or a more successful environment, and there's a lot of pushback or resistance. What that says to me is, you know what? I guess you're really not ready. You're not ready at that level. You're not ready at the level where you're willing to do something which causes real blisters on your feet. Because some of this stuff is painful. Recovery is not easy. And so it's one of the ways I use to gauge how successful somebody's going to be. If somebody is always kind of doing what the old AA people called half measures, well, I kind of, I have my phone. I don't usually use it for browsing, but I still have a browser on it, but I don't use it for browsing. And you know what? My wife goes away and I tend to go on YouTube, and that ends up causing me to edge. And then that I still have access to YouTube or my smart TV when she goes to work, or, but usually it's not a problem. All that kind of shucking and jiving, that type of scenario. What it says to me is that, you know what? You are going to really be stymied in your desire to see real systemic changes in your life. You know, there's the old fool me once thing. And I guess you would say, fool me once. I think we can blame porn or blame our flesh or temptation or whatever it is you want to blame. But fool me twice and 3 times and 4 times in exactly the same way, then the blame is squarely on me. I watched a horrible football game yesterday. And the thing that was, you know, some of you who know my story are feeling bad on my behalf, unless you hate the Cowboys, and then you're probably happy. But here's the thing that drove me over the bend. The game was winnable. But it was, you ready for it? Pre-snap penalties. That's before the ball is even snapped. They're not lining up properly. They're offside. You know, you just look where the ball is and step back a half a yard. They shot themselves in the foot, did not deserve to win the game, just on the basis of pre-snap penalties. I'm working it out of my system. You can tell I was sad yesterday. Today I'm a little less sad. Tomorrow I'll be, again. But, where are the pre-snap penalties we're making in our recovery? Some of you guys that don't follow American football, that makes no sense to you. So just ignore that piece of advice. So here is to next time. May your next time look different than your last time, because of the ways that you are repositioning yourselves towards success. So have a great rest of your day. God bless.